unexpectedly heavy business period came up this year, which slowed me down. But that hurdle has been taken care of. My suppliers increased prices, and that meant I had to spend a great deal of time working on my website. But that's all over. So it's time to get back to making this kitchen table. There have been some hiccups on the way, and I will tell you about that at the end of the video. But otherwise, I'm working on the legs and going to be putting the table together as a preliminary assembly, just to make sure everything fits the way it's supposed to. And if I'm happy with that, then I'll just pull it apart and start the final sandings and finishings that need to be done.
This is preparing the rough stock for the undercarriage, and in the case of the legs, I would have much preferred to have had 10-quarter stock to work with, but it just wasn't available, so this has to be a glue-up.
So I had to go through the same thing that I did with the top in getting a good side on each of these boards. And this pile in front of me on the workbench is the rough stock for the undercarriage of this table. And what you see right here, these pieces over here are going to be the legs. They're 2 1/4 inches wide, and these pieces are going to be the stretchers or the apron in between each of the legs, and those are 4 inches. And obviously they're needing to be cut down, but prior to being cut down, I'm going to run them all through the planer to make them a very uniform 3/4 of an inch, or 19 millimeters, I guess, would be the equivalent in metric, although it's not exact, but that's going to be next. Well, I wish I had had some thick stock to make these legs with, but just didn't happen. Doesn't show up in the commercial stores that I've got available to me, so gotta glue them up. Don't know if you can tell, but I decided to protect my bench top by putting a garbage bag down so that I didn't spill all this. Well, you've seen that I was gluing up what is the leg blank, and that's what it looks like on the square. And I'm just about to enter a fairly lengthy process. Next thing that I'm going to do is cut these down to their final 29 1/4 inches long, and that'll leave me with nice square ends. Then I'm going to mark them and put each one onto the wood lathe. and I've already got a pattern made up that I like. And what that amounts to is shaping the foot down to pretty much its final form. There's going to be a collar up on top, and then all of the portion in the middle is going to be taken down with another jig using my big router. And what that's going to end up doing is giving me tapered octagonal legs. And quite some time ago, I did a video on that, and so I'm not going to spend any time on it to speak of, but I'll put a link in the description below if you want to see more on how that jig was constructed and how it actually functions completely. So, here we go. This is just finding the center so that I can set my drive center and my live center on the wood lathe. Very handy little tool. So this is the first rough-in. This is just taking the squares down to a round. And the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to form up pretty much close to the finished foot. And there's a collar detail up here that really needs to be done prior to the router work that goes on here. But this was all done with the roughing gouge, and I'll change over to my spindle gouge and just a little bit of skew to bring that down. It's not going to look like much after the next step. It's the following step that makes it look really like the finished leg. Yes, that is a new leg blank that I've just glued up, and it will be ready possibly tomorrow, because the leg behind it, which I was turning, ended up with that piece of misery buried inside of one of the boards that you just couldn't see from the surface angles. So when I started to turn it and I cut it down, I saw it jump out, and then I went into the next phase to see if it was going to come out during the flattening phase right here. No way. So, snake bit once more, slowed down, but we'll make up for it. So the turning is done at this point, and long-time subscribers, and I mean long-time subscribers, have seen what the next step is. But the next step is to make all of these center parts look a whole lot better than they are at this point. I didn't work very hard at making that one pretty as the prototype. There's a lot of blemishes on it, but basically that fat leg turns down into that in the next jig. So this is the router jig that I use for the next step, which is making the tapered octagonal portion of this leg. And quite some time ago I did a video on making this this jig, and I'll put a link in the description below if you want to take a look at it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over it. It's pretty well described in the previous video. I'm going to show you what needs to be done to prepare the leg to go into the jig. So the first thing you need to do with this before we get it into the jig is put the indexing wheel on, and it has to be done accurately because you want certainly each 4 of the 8 faces to be lined up correctly against the tops here. So if you get this off in the wrong direction, then this is all going to be askew from the top, and that doesn't work out very well. So that's why the marks are on there, to make sure that in fact you line this up exactly properly. And I've got this already set up pretty much the way I want it to be. With the foot end being a little higher than the head end, and what that means is the taper is wider here and down to a slender foot. And I also don't want to overextend the router and get into any of the details, so that's a stop to keep it from going into the foot, and this is a stop to keep it from going into the detail up on top. The centering piece. That's the exact center in between the sides, and so I index across, get that lined up perfectly. And what this does is push in the sides just a little bit, grabs a hold of the indexing wheel, and keeps it from rotating when I put the router across it. Well, there's one side. Now what you do is undo the clamp, rotate it until it hits the next tick mark, clamp it back down, make all that sawdust again. Do it 8 times on each leg, and it should look pretty good. I'll show you the result here in just a minute. Now before I finish this up, I want to make an observation here. that this is where I want this detail to end up. But if you bring it across, what you notice is that the point is way down here. So I'm going to have to put this back on the lathe and take just a little bit more down so that that backs up and is more or less equidistant this point to this point and then this point to this point. But that's small stuff. That's basically finishing up, making it proper. But you can see it in the intermediate at this point that this is taking on a pretty nice look. I have actually, looks like just one more cut. Is that it? Or is that two? Two more cuts, yep. So this is the foot that I was going to work on to widen this detail here a little bit more. But if you look really closely, another thing that I want to do, which I thought I had done a little better in sizing the foot, is to bring that down so that it's a very smooth transition out from the octagonal part into the foot. So that means taking another, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch, maybe a little more, from the circumference of this, not the circumference, the diameter of this foot. So what I've got here is a jig to make the angle brackets to be duplicates of this. And this is the first one to come off. And the way it's set up, I've taken this board down to correct width. And this is a nice 45 degrees to the back. So each time I just put it into that position, another one of these pops off. Okay, I ran off a few extra of these, and I've decided that these are the 8 that I'm calling my keepers. This one is almost good enough in case I mess one up, and I did not like one, so these are my keepers. And I'm now arranging them in a very, very microscopic way of being pairs. So those two looked a little different from these other 6, and I've sort of decided that that's going to be a pair. And since I'm going to have numbered corners anyway, this makes a lot of sense. So I want them to be just as identical as possible to make the corner nice and square and even. So these are going to be 1, these are going to be 2, these are going to be 3, these are going to be 4. And if I keep them together, that identifies exactly what the corner is. So this is just finishing up the angle blocks, and I'm just going to use the bandsaw to go in here, because this is, as I previously said, this just isn't important to make beautiful. So just roughing that out in the bandsaw is all it needs. What I'm setting up to do here is put some countersink pilot holes in, and I'm going to be setting these in place with number 10 screws, and there are going to be 2 of them. And I'm also going to glue those in place because I don't want any thread at all of these breaking off if somebody hits a corner of this table pretty hard somehow. So this is just a quick jig setup on my drill press. And I'm going to do the inside ones, countersink first, and then I'm going to reposition and do the outer ones. And if there was any question about it, that countersink was specifically for number 10 screws. I did check one out, and it did not crack the wood. I'm going to keep a clutch on it so that I don't drive the head in too hard, and I think that's going to be real good to go. Okay, on my angle brackets here, I finally made a decision on how I'm going to fasten the legs. Since there are going to be 2 of these for each leg, I finally decided on a quarter inch hex bolt, and these are 2 1/4 inches long. And one of my considerations here is uneven floors. So rather than making a tight fitting hole in here, I'm going to put a 5/16 because I'm going to be cinching these down while it's actually in the table configuration, so that if there are some slight variations in the floor, there's going to be just a little bit of wiggle room up or down for individual legs to make sure that they're not rattling around on the floor. So I'm all set up here to pop one of these 5/16 holes into the middle of my brackets. So the next thing that I'm going to do, which is basically the last thing that I'm going to do specifically with the legs, is to lop off this inside corner. And I've already gone through and decided cosmetically which side of the legs I want to be toward the inside, and that's what this X means. I'm going to take that corner off, and what this indicates is that's how much I need to take off so that the brace fits in there. And in fact, what I really want to do is have just a little bit more than that, so that the leg doesn't butt up against the brace, but as I put the leg bolt in, it gets pulled up against these 2 sides very tightly. So this is what it turns out to be. As it sat there, it was touching the brace. It was about a 1/2 inch, and so I'm going to back it off by 1/8 of an inch. I think that'll suit my needs just nicely. So this is almost exactly how I want this to be placed. I want there to be just a little reveal on the edges, and then when I get 2 of those blocks placed correctly, there will be a lag bolt set in there in both of them, which will then pull that exactly up just like I did there when I pushed it in, and it will be wonderful. So this is the beginning of the initial assembly process, and what you see here is I've got an assembly jig that's going to hold adjacent pieces together in just the correct orientation so that when I bring in the bracket, I can lift it up just high enough and it fits in properly right there. And then I'll put another spacer in and stack that right on top of it. And each of the corners is going to get 2 of these brackets just this way. And as I say, this is the initial assembly, so I'm not going to glue them in place. However, I do need to pre-drill so that I don't split or break screws. I split the wood.
Pre-drilling the apron is a 2-step process. First, I just mark the location of the holes, and then I pull the bracket out and finish drilling the pilot holes. Next step is to drill some pilot holes into the leg, and this is where the lag bolts are going to go through. And I would like to center those, so the way I'm going to do that is by just marking the spots with this bit, which is the size that the brace was drilled. But in fact, that's the size of the pilot hole for the lag bolts. This is way too big, and all I want to do is mark the center of it. So let's see if you can see that there's one here and one here.
I'd say that's beginning to look like a table.
Well, that's as far as I want to take this one. You can clearly see that I've got a table on my hands. It may be evident, although it may not be evident, that there are a lot of details that I need to accomplish prior to final assembly. I also need to put some sanding on. I need to do the edge work on the top, and then all of the finish that needs to be done. And I want to explain how I've come to a choice with the color. And there are a couple of details, so I guess there's going to be one more, which is just going to be wrapping up a few of those details. Shouldn't be a long one on the last one, but then I said this one was going to come fairly quickly, and I had some stumbles on the way, but I appreciate just hanging on and viewing this. So come on back and see the very end of it when it should be sitting in my kitchen. Thanks a lot. I'm Tom Stevens. I'll have some more pretty soon.